Today, we have a coaching call with Alex, not his real name. We're going to chat about the success he's already achieved and plan for the future. Welcome to Richer Soul, your journey to a more purposeful, intentional, amazing life. Where are you going to go and how are you going to get there? Let's figure that out together. At the core is the financial well-being to be able to do what you want, when you want, how you want. It's about personal freedom and abundance. Today, we're going to help Alex build abundance and his Richer Soul life. In earlier episodes, I offered a free coaching call to people. That offer is now over. However, I will offer a 50% discount on an initial session to anyone who signs up between now and June 30th. Over the next few weeks, you'll be able to listen to some of the people who took advantage of that offer. Today, it's Alex. Let's meet him. Welcome to Richer Soul. Today, we have another coaching client, and this is Alex. Welcome, Alex. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Rocky.
So, Alex, would you do us a favor and introduce yourself to the audience? Tell us a little bit about where you're at currently.
Certainly. So my name is Alex. I am 30 years old, or I will be in about 2 weeks. And let's see, a little bit about me. So I grew up in California and moved off to Oregon when I was 17 to go to college. Got a Bachelor of Liberal Arts. After that, I graduated right when the Great Recession hit, which was unfortunate timing, and I had a spout of construction that I did for a while. And then pretty quickly, about 6 months later, moved into IT work, where I remained a day. I've kind of always been drawn to computers and figuring out how they work and fixing them and making things with them. And that's kind of what I ended up doing for my profession as well. I've been doing that since 2010, so about 7 years full-time professionally, and recently moved to Washington in order to, my wife is pursuing a doctorate of physical therapy degree, and her graduate school was up here. So we moved and have been basically getting used to the Washington area for the past year and a half.
Very nice. Quick question. You said that you've always enjoyed IT, and that's where you're working. And yet you got a liberal arts degree.
Yes, I get that a lot. So when I was 17, my parents, I was homeschooled for a little context here. I'd always done quite a lot of reading, anything from fiction to nonfiction to whatever interested me. My parents, most specifically my mother, really believed strongly in the power of education and developing a liberal arts education. So she encouraged me to go to a liberal arts school for 1 year and try it out. And if it didn't fit, then I could move on and get a technological degree like I wanted. So I took 1 year at a small private liberal arts school and actually really liked it quite a lot, and especially liked the relationships I formed there. So I decided to finish my degree there. I really think it helped me develop a side of myself that would not otherwise have been developed, as far as critical thinking, the ability to write clearly and communicate with others. And that is not really a skill a lot of IT workers have. So I think it's actually really helped me with my career.
You know what? And that makes a lot of sense now that you've actually spelled it out. So I think this is one of the things when people think of liberal arts degrees, they don't think of what was truly the classical liberal arts degree, which is what you have, where you have to think critically and you have to learn to communicate and go through all of that. I think they think of what's now become a liberal arts degree, which is quite different than that. So that makes perfect sense. And yes, that is, those skills are transferable to anything you do. And unfortunately, they are not taught either at the high school level. And unless you go to a college that specifically does that, those types of skills are not taught at a college level. However, they give you the tools to be able to do whatever you want. And as you are correct, in the tech field, there are people cannot do this. And so you become a superstar within that field, which is what I think you've already found out.
Yeah. And when I went to school, the professors there, they would repeatedly say that the skills you're gaining here, they're not going to get you necessarily a job. I mean, no one gets a job based on the ability to communicate alone. But they said the skills you are building here will help you with whatever career you get. And while I was in school, I heard that, like, yeah. I mean, how much better at communication could we be here with this education than everyone else? And then I got into the quote unquote real world and my first corporate job and then I saw just the level of communication done by a lot of my colleagues just was, I guess it just wasn't the level I was at as far as being able to write a clear email, something that I had been able to take for granted at that point, and then seeing other emails people write going, oh, this is just very confusing. And that's why the customer's upset. This isn't actually a technological problem at all anymore. It's just a communication problem. So it took me a few years to realize that the skills I had actually were quite valuable and really did help me stand out as a worker in corporate America. And something I had taken for granted turns out to be actually quite valuable.
And I think that lesson goes to many parts of our lives. The things we take for granted, our superpowers, are actually quite valuable when we understand them and we utilize them and we come to appreciate them. Just out of curiosity, what college did you go to?
I went to a college called Gutenberg College in Eugene, Oregon.
Okay.
It's extremely small. And when I say extremely small, I mean my graduating class was 13 people. So we have very, very intimate relations with everyone there and the professors. Everyone is on a first name basis. So it's very personal and very unique in that they're still doing like the traditional liberal arts education. The first 2 years of my education were spent basically studying Western civilization from, some of the earliest writings, like the Epic of Gilgamesh. And then we read all the way through major authors until we come to the 21st century and start reading philosophy there as well. So there's a large focus on history and philosophy and basically just thinking through all the concepts of Western civilization through the years.
That's amazing. That in itself, I think, is a podcast episode that maybe we'll have one day, because I think people really need to understand what they probably don't even know they're missing.
100%.
So since we're talking about growing up, tell me about when you were growing up and thoughts and conversations around money.
So I grew up in a very small town in California. It had a population of around 6,000 to 8,000. My father was a small business owner, and my mom did not work. She spent most of the time raising myself and my brother, taking care of the house. And so my dad was the only sole income source. The conversations we had around money growing up were, there's not a lot of it. We were solidly middle class. We never really worried about food, like having enough food or paying rent or bills, stuff like that. But there was never a lot of excess money either. How we spent our money was always heavily discussed and thought through. I do remember money was a point of tension between my parents quite a bit in terms of how my mother wanted to spend money, did not always line up with how my dad wanted to spend money. So what I kind of walked away from my childhood was money is hard to come by and there's never enough, but if you are thoughtful with it, you can make it work.
And how does that change to how you think about money today?
How I think about money today, I think so until last year, actually, let me back up a second and talk about something else. My dad tried very hard to, and I think successfully, to kind of instill a work ethic in my brother and I, as well as the concept of kind of saving is important. He also tried to instill like investing is important as well, and like growing your money. But what I walked away with is watching him try to micromanage his investments substantially. And so he would spend 10 or 15 hours a week sorting through investment paperwork and figuring out what he wanted to do and being stressed with that. So I walked away with, okay, so saving your money is good, but investing is too much work, and I don't want to live that kind of lifestyle. When I got into college and then when I graduated, I tended to be a very frugal person with my money and not spend very much. I think what I go back to is when I was making $1,200 a month right out of college doing manual labor part-time, I was saving $600 of that and still paying rent and groceries, et cetera, with the other 600. That sort of frugal mindset where, there's never going to be enough, I think really has kind of controlled my money or controlled my my life really into the last year and a half, I'd say, in spite of me going from making $11 an hour out of college to at this point having a six-figure income. There has been a big shift in the last year, which is I now understand that it's possible to invest my money in a way which has a high likelihood of bringing good returns and also requires not a ton of time and energy on my part to manage it. What changed there is I read a book called I think it's The Coffee Shop Investor or Coffee House Investor by Bill Schultheis. And he basically lays out a way where you can invest for the long term with minimal effort. And that's really what I was looking for because I don't want to spend 15 hours a week managing investments. But I would say to sum up, I still kind of have a mindset of there's never going to be enough money. Yeah, it feels like, I always want to make more money because I'm worried about there not being enough. It feels a little bit controlling.
And I think that's a normal mindset for most people. It's kind of the American way.
Yeah. Well, and I think a little bit of that is, so right out of college and when I graduated in 2008, I started dating an underclassmate. And we ended up getting married in 2009. She had 1 year left of school. So she graduated in 2010. And we had about, $35,000 of debt at that point. So we spent a lot of time and money to paying that off. After that, she worked for a little bit. And that was the first time we've experienced kind of like financial abundance in our life with two incomes. We typically didn't spend a ton of it and saved a lot of it. We were saving up for a house. But then she quit her job to go back to school to get a doctorate of physical therapy because she wasn't happy with the job she was at. And so it felt like, again, I just feel like so much pressure on me to provide and always make sure there's enough that I kind of end up obsessing over it a little bit.
And we went through, and you sent me your cash flow statement, and you don't overspend. You have a considerable gap there, meaning that you're spending a lot less than you make.
Mm-hmm.
So there's room for problems. You've got your savings accounts and cash accounts there that if an emergency comes up, you can handle it. And you've got retirement accounts that are well funded for your age, and clearly they're all going in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
So you're doing the right things, and in spite of that, I know we still have those things that gnaw inside of us. Correct?
Yeah, correct. At this point, I just feel like I realize, given my context and given everything, I think I'm doing quite well financially. But at the same time, I expect more progress from myself, I think is what it comes down to. Is I look at it, I'm like, well, oh man, I should be so much farther ahead at my point in my life. I think that's what kind of gets me. I keep wanting to get further ahead and further ahead. And yeah.
And that's human nature. And that's just the way we are. I think we've always been that. No matter where you are, you want more and you want the next thing. Mm-hmm. Your numbers for your age put you ahead of most people, probably far ahead of most people. The only concerning thing on that whole thing is your student loans, and you're working on those. And I know she's going back to school to invest in a better job. And I know you're smart enough to say, well, once she comes out, we can crank those down in a few years. So that will all correct itself. In the meantime, you're living below your means and constantly putting money away. So the way to look at that is to actually run the numbers and see what it looks like. So have you ever actually done something like that, to put your current numbers in a calculator, put in your current savings into a calculator and see what the outcomes are going forward?
I do. So I have some fun things to say about that. As far as the debt goes specifically, I actually went so far as to write a computer program to project the various outcomes of like how quickly we pay out the debt and how much interest we will pay doing that. So you could put in basically a number and get, all right, so if we take 18 months to pay it off, here's what our monthly payment would look like. And here's how much interest we would end up paying over that 18 months. And then but that's more like getting rid of the debt. In terms of like, what would our assets look like as they grow? Every few months I find some sort of random financial calculator and plug in the numbers to see how quickly we could accumulate enough assets to generate income to cover our basic living expenses. So I have done some playing around with that with different goals in mind. Like, what if we wanted just enough assets to cover our basic cost of living with no frivolities? What if we wanted to cover our cost of living and 50% of our frivolities? What if we wanted to cover 100% of both with room to spare? So I do kind of play around with the numbers every once in a while. Part of that's coming out of, I read Tony Robbins' book, Money, Master the Game recently, and he talked about his different stages of financial well-being. And so I kind of took and stole some of those ideas and have been playing around with those.
And so what does the analysis tell you?
To get to a point where we could cover most, let's say, cover our basic living expenses and nothing else, we're talking probably a good 6 to 7 years of heavy saving and living at our current standard of living. To get to a place where we basically would have covered all our discretionary spending, all our basic like necessities, and then some, we're talking probably more about 10 to 12 years, I think. So where I look at those numbers, I think, all right, the 6 to 7 is very doable. I think we're going to do that one for sure. But when I talk about 10 to 12 years, that one seems really far away in that, like, I really don't know that I want to live at my current standard of living for another 10 or 12 years, especially if that means me working a job I'm not thrilled with for that time. It seems like a waste of my life is what it seems like.
And so in looking at there's a couple of different things that come up.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things is you're looking to live at a higher standard of living. Is that correct?
I would like to, yeah.
Okay. What exactly does that look like day to day? What does that mean?
Sure. So right now we live in one of the cheapest apartments in our area. We live in a location with a very high, I'm just going to say it. We live in Seattle, Washington, and it's very high cost of living here in terms of rent. We've kept that down very well, but that means some sacrifices, meaning there's some, holes in the carpet, the walls are beat up, and there's some mold in some places we're uncomfortable with. I would like to live in a house that doesn't have mold in it. I would like to feel the freedom to cook more exotic things, which would mean increasing our food budget by a couple $100s a month, probably. To feel some more freedom about like cooking what I want and not just dictated based on what it's going to cost. I would also like the freedom to basically travel more and see places with more regularity. And that's both a financial thing, but also a time thing too. I would love to be able to take a month off a year and go someplace, which isn't very feasible in my current line of work. But as far as the money goes, like that's kind of what I'm looking for, I think.
Okay. And, they're all reasonable things. And somewhere you have to find the balance that works for you. The question you have to ask yourself then, because it's time and then it's money. So if I say to you, right, at this point, it'll take you, say, 6 years to get what you want.
Mm-hmm.
If it takes you 10 years, but those 10 years, you have a little nicer house, a little nicer food, and a couple of trips, are you willing to make that trade-off? Because that's what it is. We all have to make trade-offs. Are you willing to make the trade-off?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
I would much rather do 10 years at like a sustainable, enjoyable pace than 6 years at a pace or a lifestyle that makes both my wife and I unhappy.
So you're a smart guy. You know how to run the numbers. Sit down, run the numbers, have the conversations, and make choices. And then even amongst those, you make choices. So you have a lot of variability in each of those. And you can say to yourself, I would rather have this house. I'll give up a little travel, and I'm okay with this food, which means, twice a week we're going to do this, and 5 times a week we're not. So they're all levers. And I think what happens in life, most people look at a purchase decision as yes or no. I want to buy a new car. That'll make me happy. If I don't buy a new car, I'm not happy. I'm going to buy the car. But wait a minute. That's not the only lever. I want to buy a new car. I want a nicer apartment. I want better food. And I'd like to go on a trip. Which of those things is more important to me? And then adjust your levers. So I'm not going to buy a new car because I prefer a little nicer apartment and I want a little nicer food. So now me not buying the car is not me being in misery and denying myself and living without the things I want. It's saying I'm making a conscious decision that these things are more important than those things, and I'm going to spend my money there.
Yeah, it's all about prioritization.
It's all about prioritization. You know how to do that. You can sit down and do that. And if you want to have a talk about that at this moment, we can. If you haven't done it and that's a follow-up, then that's a follow-up.
And so I think I know what I want. I think that I need to have that conversation again with my wife and get us on the same page. If I don't do that, what I can tell you what will end up happening is I'm going to just railroad all over my wife and basically make what I want to have happening at the sacrifice at what she wants. And I don't ultimately want to do that to her.
Correct. Now, there's the second half of that whole game. Right now, all of your decisions were based on your current income with a certain growth level?
The playing around with numbers I did were based on a static saving rate. That was no growth in savings rate. So I would type in a number and just say, if we save X dollars per year, assuming a conservative 6% growth per year, how long would it take to hit my target number? And then most of the playing around I did was with the X dollars per year.
So the other half of this whole equation is there's the saving and spending side, which are all fine. Well, they're clear. We know what they are. There's the income side. And so now comes the question of how do we increase income so that we can do more of what we want and get the things we want faster. So there's a variety of ways to increase income. You can get super duper creative if you start thinking through them. So I'm just going to throw a bunch of stuff out just to kind of share different ideas. And it's not to say you should do any of these. I just want to open up possibilities. So one possibility is switching jobs. Another possibility is doing whatever you need to get ahead at your job and increase your income at work. Another possibility is getting involved with real estate, looking at creative ways to do something. So I don't know exactly what Seattle's real estate market looks like. Can I buy a duplex where I buy a house and I rent half the house out? Or I figure out a way. I know in a lot of these cities, like literally people will go buy a house. They will live in the basement of the house and they'll rent the upstairs out. So I get to build equity. I get someone else helping me to pay, and you still get a little bit nicer of a lifestyle. Can I do something within the real estate market to change that? Clearly, your wife going to work is going to change that as well. And the last thing is, do I start a business on the side? do I do something else above and beyond that will help me generate other types of income? And that might be something that your wife can do, you can do together, or that you do separately. All of these things, though, come back to one thing that we haven't talked about that I know is probably something that needs to also get laid out, which is, are we going to have children?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So that is a conversation we are currently having. My wife, when we got married, neither of us knew whether or not we wanted to have kids almost 8 years ago. At this point, my wife definitely wants to have kids. I do want to have kids. I think it would be an honor and a privilege to raise someone and help them grow. And I think I'd be good at that, actually. But I have some fears around it that prevent me from saying yes. And I think those are twofold. The first is kids take a lot of time. And I worry that if we have kids, my wife wouldn't be able to work, which is concerning for me because we spent so much time and energy and money getting her this degree she's pursuing. The second thing is just around energy levels for myself. I know that kids take a lot of time and energy to do. I find that my life right now is already quite busy. And so the idea of taking on more work, I guess I'm feared that it's going to be too much for me and that I'm going to fail.
You won't fail. Trust me. You'll figure it out. Life is like that. Things just happen. So, a couple things to think through. First and foremost, everyone thinks about having their child. They don't think about the totality of that whole thing. I had kids a little bit later. And one of the downfalls of having kids later is that you are still with kids later. So I'm in my 50s and I still have teenagers. That is something you have to sit down and say to yourself, what are the pluses and minuses of having a child at 32 versus 36 or 37? Mm-hmm. And what's it going to look like on the back end? And what is all of that going to kind of look like? So that's one decision you've got to sit down. Once you decide, yes, we're having kids, then you've got to sit down and look at that timing issue. I know you have sunk costs with your wife's education. Mm-hmm. So the second question is, how many kids are we going to have? Are we having one? Are we having two? Are we having five? Because that really changes the whole equation. Have you had any of those thoughts yet?
I think we both are in the at least two, but probably not three camp. Okay.
So two are easy and economical. When you go to three, what ends up happening is you go from playing one-on-one to playing zone defense. And all of a sudden, when you want to go somewhere, you now need 2 hotel rooms. So a lot of the things kind of multiply once you go beyond 2. The other thing is then the timing of the kids. Do we have our kids close together? So if you have 2 kids relatively close together, then, all right, if I have a kid 1 today, kid 2 in 2 years, that means for 7 years, I've got kids who are in under the age of going to school full time. Mm-hmm. If you have 3 kids, now you're at 9 or 10 years of having kids not in school at the time.
Sure.
Unless you figure out how to have twins, then it's easier, right? To compact them down, but there's no way to really do that well. Yeah. You've got to sit down and look at all those different factors and make those decisions. Mm-hmm. Then you've got to say to yourself, which of you would be the better parent to stay home? Which of you has the greater earnings income as well? Mm-hmm. And that's to say someone's staying home with the child. If someone's not staying home with the child, then you've got to figure out the cost of daycare. And I'm guessing the cost of daycare in Seattle is high.
Astronomical.
So here's the one thing that, and I said this to someone else on a coaching call the other day. I don't understand why mothers make a decision to stay home or fathers make a decision to stay home. They don't watch someone else's kid. You're already home with one kid. How about having a friend over for them to play with that someone pays you for it? If the cost of care is astronomical, that means someone might be willing to pay you good money to do that. And if you're a professional, smart person, finding a babysitter who's a professional, smart person who's going to actually teach my child to count and write letters and do all of that, it's an idea that kind of opens up more financial possibilities. But
that's actually a really good idea.
These are all conversations you have to sit down and have. I know you're concerned about the money that went in. So she's got how long till she graduates? Another 2 years?
She will graduate the middle of next year. So middle of 2018.
So a year, essentially.
Yes.
So you've got a year out. And at that point, I would at least say probably get some work experience. And I don't know if there's licensing and all that stuff, but get all that stuff handled. Just because once it's done, and it's much easier to do now than it is in the future. Once you've got your baseline, then you've got to figure out your kid situation. And the kids are basically, if you have 2 kids and you can have them relatively close together, that's a 7-year time frame, 7 years off of what she's doing, unless you choose to get childcare, which you may end up being literally at the same place, unless she makes enough that you can do that and still not have stress and still keep everything else in line, which is not easy. It's difficult to do all of that.
Yeah.
So the two of you need to have deep conversations and just start laying all this stuff out. You know how to think critically. Just go do it.
Yeah, you're right.
And then once you have your thing laid out, then you start to say to yourself, what are my options? How do I upgrade my housing without spending more money? So does rental real estate come into that?
That makes sense. Yeah, we just need to have the conversation. I think I've kind of painted myself into a corner, at least mentally, like, oh, I have no options. But really, I mean, there are clearly options, like you pointing out the watch another kid. That alone would be very helpful financially and probably buy us a lot of breathing room for a couple of years if that was something we worked out. So that's a good idea.
You know what else you can do? There are actually exchange students who come to the United States to go to high school. They need a house to live in.
Oh.
You can put an exchange student in your house, and I don't know what the Seattle rate is, but maybe you get $600 a month to watch a kid.
Sure.
That's kind of on their own. And so there are other ways to make money. You talked about better food. So what happens if you decide to hold some sort of cooking class or cooking service and you cook exotic kind of foods for people once a week? We'll deliver an exotic meal to you. Well, you know what that means? There's always excess when you cook. You get an exotic meal. You get paid to deliver an exotic meal. And now you get what you want. You have fun doing something you're enjoying, and you get money or extra benefit from it.
Sure. That makes sense. Yeah. And I think I've tended to be a very pessimistic person most of my life, and I'm working to change that, but where sometimes I just need people to tell me there's options, and for me to start looking rather than just going, there's no options here. I'm done.
Now, I think for most people, they get in that closed mindset, and they get either they don't see options, they're told there are no options, or the options they're told just aren't what they want to do, or they take an option without thinking it through, and then they get stuck. I made this choice, but I didn't think through all of the things that was going to lead to, and now I'm screwed.
Sure.
So if you sit down, have the conversations with your wife, there are a million options. You just have to ask yourself, how else can we accomplish what we want to do, and start looking for that? You'd be surprised at what pops up, and you'd be surprised at how many opportunities there are out there.
Sure. It may ultimately make sense for us too. I mean, she needs to graduate. I'd like to spend, we both want to spend the year after that just paying off the debt. We think we can do it in a year if we're aggressive. And at that point, it may make sense just to spend a year or two accumulating a larger nest egg or whatever, so we have a bigger buffer before we go into the 7 years of kids or 5 years of kids or however that looks. I think that would help me feel a lot more comfortable knowing that, we have a buffer if something were to go horribly wrong, to where we could cover just reasonably anything that would come up until you can start working again or something like that.
Absolutely. And again, the other question then comes up, is Seattle where you want to live?
Mm-hmm. We both really like Seattle for a lot of things. I love Seattle in a lot of ways, honestly. The property prices here are astronomical. I think the median, I was talking to someone last night, and they said the median price for a single family home is $722,000 at this point. We're just not going to buy a home at that level. I don't think either of us value it enough to put that kind of financial burden over our head.
How much would it cost you to rent a $722,000 house?
That is a good question. I do not know the answer to that. I think most of our friends, if they're renting, are paying between $2,000 to $3,000 a month, I want to say.
From an economic standpoint, it makes sense to rent. Because the cost of housing is out of whack. Now, one of the things you can do is just be ready for opportunity. Because there is always opportunity in real estate. There is always something happens where someone needs to get rid of a house and they need to get rid of it fast. And if you are in the right place at the right time with the cash, you have the opportunity to find a deal.
Sure. That makes sense. Yeah. And it would be nice to be set up to, be able to take advantage of those when they come across. And not be, sorry, we don't have the money or whatever.
Correct. So one of the things that requires, and I think I'm looking at you're heavy to the 401k side, is to have outside of retirement account money. Because that's the money that you can easily access to go do something like that. So to balance your income in and out of retirement accounts.
It's interesting you would say that, because how we plan to pay off the debt is not to make monthly payments necessarily. We'll probably pay the minimums for that year. But what we are going to do is basically accumulate enough in our savings to make one gigantic payment at the end of that year. And the reason we want to do that is we realize the opportunity cost of not having any cash on hand. And if something were to happen, such as the stock market were to crater or a house or something like that, we would rather be able to buy stocks when they're cheap or take advantage of that house opportunity and then just delay the paying off the debt for a little bit, because we can get that interest rate really low.
And that works. Again, always having flexibility and choices and not locking yourself into something, or having a mindset that this is all I can do, give you the flexibility to do whatever you want to do and the opportunity to do that as well.
Got it.
So when I went through and I looked through the answers that you sent in for your questions, a couple words kept popping up. Fear and stress.
Yes.
So we've talked a little bit about fear. Are there other fears that are out there or concerns along those lines?
Yeah, I struggle with the fear of just not, I won't be okay. Both I won't be okay interrelationally. One of the challenges my wife and I have had is I started off our relationship by, if you get to know me, you will leave me, with that belief, which means I never wanted to be vulnerable with her. So that's been something I've had to work on quite a bit, honestly. But I also fear not being okay, like just physically or economically. Like, what if I lose my house and lose my job and lose my apartment and lose like everything and have to live on the street? So I quite often have this underlying anxiety about, will I be okay or not? Yeah, that sort of fear, I think, leads to a fair amount of anxiety and stress, which is what came through, I think, in those questions.
All right. And you already graduated at the worst time in the history of the United States to graduate, probably.
Mm-hmm.
How'd it go?
We survived, and it was stressful, especially not like starting out. I'm glad you brought this up, because I talked to my wife about this the other day. I said, you know what? I graduated at the worst year possible in the last 50 years. And I graduated with almost zero job experience, and yet we still survived. That's pretty cool. And if it happened again, I think we'd be better off to tackle that problem. We survived. That's what happened. We survived, and it went okay.
Was it really bad during that time, or were you okay?
We were okay. Things were very stressful financially when we started out. We lived very frugally, and we were still barely surviving. We had about $100 room of buffer in our budget per month, and we weren't excessive at all when we had our car paid off, etc. That, for me, was a very anxious period in my life, just realizing that a single large car expense would basically sink us. At that point, we had no savings to rely on or fall back on. I was the only one working an entry-level job, and we were accumulating debt due to my wife being in school. I was very stressed at that point in time. It wasn't until she graduated, we stopped getting debt, and we started paying it down, and things kind of eased up, and I got a little bit more comfortable around it. But I go like, oh, it could go bad again. Like, we have to be prepared for anything. Is kind of a mindset I have, I think.
There's nothing wrong with being prepared. It's just that I think you don't have to worry about it in your case as much as other people, because you're already starting to build your base, and you've got it. You have a well-paying job, which means you're smart. You know how to do things. So your skill sets will help you. One way that you can get rid of some of those concerns is to build personal capital. So personal capital or social capital is, I guess the best way to say this is, if tomorrow morning Warren Buffett woke up and all his money was gone and his house burnt down, I can assure you by the afternoon, Warren Buffett would be in good hands. Right? He knows what to do. He knows how to make money. He's got friends and people who will help him. Build yourself a life of friends and people that will support and help you. Build yourself work relationships that if you lose your job today, there are 6 people who say, I want Alex to come work for me tomorrow. Why don't you quit your job? Make yourself that kind of person that everybody wants, that's got the network, that can reach out, that has the skills to be able to do something, so that if everything falls apart, you have the skills to stand up and go, I can handle this.
Yeah. No, that's a really good suggestion, actually. No, that makes a lot of sense, actually. Friends are what helped us get through that last time. Just even having relationships that were supportive in our life was hugely helpful. And they weren't like financially supportive. They were just emotionally supportive and like could commiserate. Maybe they were in a similar situation. That's helpful. But also having friends who can well, I know this job's open. I think you'd be really great at it. Come and interview. I guess I don't feel like I have that in Seattle right now, just because I'm kind of new to the area and kind of still getting my social connections built. Although, now that I think about it, I attend a monthly meetup on programming every month. And like, I'm starting to get to know people there, and they know me, and we chat. if I were to lose my job today, I could go talk to them and I'm sure get like 2 or 3 interviews in a week or two lined up. So I think I maybe have more resources than I think.
There you go. And you know what kids do? Kids open up a massive network. It's amazing.
Oh, really?
Well, because think about it. You're all hanging out with other people who've got kids the same age as yours.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden, it just really opens up the social networks because everyone's there for their kid. And it helps to open that up. So as I'm looking at all these things, I don't see a lot of particular risks in your life in the sense that something small is going to knock you off.
Yeah.
It sounds like everything is going pretty well.
It is, honestly. My wife and we've both worked very hard, and it seems like we do have, there's things to show for that, just in terms of our financial stability that we have kind of built for ourselves and the life we are building. I think we're going to have opportunities that a lot of people aren't fortunate enough to have. And we've kind of lucked into some of those, but there's also a lot of work we've put into building this as well. And I think I don't do a good job at recognizing myself for that and recognizing her for that enough about how hard we have worked and what that has actually translated into.
Absolutely. And that's one thing we all do. We kind of downplay our success in a sense. Mm-hmm. And when you start talking to people, or if you go and see what other people who are at your age and the situation they're in, especially once your wife graduates next year, you're going to be at the top of the income curve and you're going to be spending way below your means. And so you will be in a good situation. And since she's in the medical field, her income is pretty much almost guaranteed in a sense that there are always jobs in that field.
Mm-hmm. When we made the decision for her to go back to school, there were 2 things that made me comfortable with it. One was we were diversifying our incomes into 2 different industries, mine being IT and hers being medical. And 2, I wanted her to have the ability to bring in an income and feel secure herself and not have to rely on me. I think you're right. The medical industry will do that quite nicely. This is actually reminding me of something that kind of helped me. During the Great Recession, I was laid off 2 times from construction, which makes sense. You don't build stuff during it. But then I was reading recently, and the unemployment rates for people in the top earners in the United States during that time was like 1%, whereas other industries, the ones I was working in, were as high as, I think, 20% or something like that. I think I also need to recognize that I'm just a lot less vulnerable than I was at that point to even recessions, just given that there's certain industry levels and certain income levels which are more vulnerable than others. And I no longer necessarily fall into that category.
Correct. And the reality is IT isn't going away. It is the wave of the future. As long as you're constantly learning and growing, and you've got a base skill set, which is the ability to communicate and to do that well. And that gives you an amazing skill set in and of itself. Critical thinking and learning that skill puts you way at the top of the curve. Let's talk a little bit about your current work situation, how you're feeling, and what your concerns are.
Great. Let me just run down work history and give a context here. I started working part-time when I was 10 or 11 for my father. And he paid us, I think he paid us $10 an hour, which was crazy for being 10 or 11. But there was a condition, which is he was just going to take all that money and basically put it into a Roth IRA for us and save it for us. So we didn't work much. We worked like an hour or 2 a week, my brother and I. So it ended up being maybe $40, $50 a month that we would save. When I was a teenager, I think about 14, he said it was time for me to get a summer job during the summers, during when school was off. So he provided the upfront capital for buying a lawnmower. Or did I provide it? I don't remember. Anyways, I started a lawn mowing business that I did for, I think, 3 years. And just part-time, worked a couple hours a week, made good money doing that. When I got 15, 16, I started working full-time during the summers doing technical support. for a local internet service provider. I got some technical support experience in high school. And then after college, my first full-time corporate gig was also technical support. And that's what I've been doing since 2000 into 2009, is technical support for two different corporations. While I am very good at that, and I do that successfully, I'm just tired of it, honestly. I'm just tired of always fixing things that are broken. And I'm just not passionate about that. I am looking for some sort of a change around that. I still want to be in IT. I don't want to leave IT or anything like that. I enjoy like technology and computers and learning this stuff. But I'm just kind of always tired of picking up the phone and knowing that the other person on the end of the line really wishes they didn't have to speak to me because it means something's gone wrong.
I don't know enough about the field and the issues you deal with.
Mm-hmm.
But when you pick up the phone, do things fall into a handful of categories or issues, or are they all unique and different?
Let me think about that. I'd say there's a handful of rough categories things fall into, but when you get down to the nitty gritty, they're often unique. Does that make sense? So you may have a problem with a particular thing not working, but the reason it's not working is kind of subtle and unique.
Here's the reason I'm asking. If you could say, you know what, things are constantly breaking, I want to figure out a way to make them unbreakable.
Got it. Okay. So it's not that sort of thing, unfortunately. A lot of it, sometimes it's just a configuration issue, sometimes it's a code level issue, sometimes it's a customer environment issue. A lot of the cases I work end up actually not being a bug or a problem with us, but the customer doesn't know what's going on. They just kind of throw up their hands, say, call these guys. We think it might be them. We're not sure. And so it's our job to either point to us, point to someone else, or if it is us, basically tell them what's going wrong.
Okay.
So I think I get what you're saying with that is, maybe don't be reactive, but be proactive and go fix the root cause of what's causing these calls. Is that kind of what you're thinking?
Yes. Got
it. Okay. The problems I'm dealing with, unfortunately, they don't have one underlying root cause.
Okay.
That's
fine.
As I get more responsibility and more advanced in my career, I get more interesting opportunities to make a difference within organizations that I'm a part of. For my last organization and for this organization, we had very specific needs for a very specific tool to solve a problem. In both cases, we had an existing tool that did it, but it was pretty kludgy and pretty unpleasant to work with and just didn't really solve the problem very well. There were issues with it. In both cases, what I decided to do was basically build from scratch a new web application to solve this problem and solve it well. And I find that to be incredibly enjoyable and fulfilling. And it's been some of the most, enjoyable work I've done in the past 7 years is knowing, hey, I saw a problem and I solved it. And not only did I solve it really, really dang well.
And I think that was the point I was getting to. If you can find those opportunities, it sounds like that's a perfect fit for you. Are there opportunities like this within where you're working or within the industry?
So in my immediate team, I don't see an opportunity for this right now. In a team adjacent to mine, I know a gentleman who sort of has that sort of job where he basically, people come to him with problems, internal problems, and say, can we solve this somehow? What tools or what technology would we need to solve this? So his job is to basically figure that out. I talked to him about this.
Is he overworked?
He is not overworked, unfortunately. But I did talk to him. I said, how did you get that job? Because that job is awesome. And he's like, I have it really good. I have the best job in the world, and I have no idea how I got it. But I could, now that I'm thinking about this, I could actually speak to his manager and just say, hey, listen, if something else comes up that's like that, that's what I want. Come to me, I'm your man. So maybe I need to have that conversation.
is there a specific job title to that, or did it just happen to be that whenever there was a problem, he always had a solution?
It was that. So he has a job title, which is basic. It's an engineering role, and he's primarily geared towards fixing customer issues, at least based on his official title. But he spends maybe 10, maybe 20% of his job doing that. And the rest of his job is building stuff for the company. And that is just because he kind of became the go-to guy. He's smart, he's intelligent, he's able to communicate well, and he also understands the technology aspect. So he's kind of got like that blend, which makes him a good fit for that.
How different is he than you?
We're actually remarkably similar in a lot of ways. I just have to figure out how to get into his position.
So it's not his position, it's what he does.
Mm.
You don't need a change in title. You just need to start going to people and saying, hey, if you haven't, or going to people and saying, what issues do you currently have? What's driving you crazy this week?
Mm-hmm.
And then saying, would it make sense if someone could fix that? And then fixing it. And then you start to get that type of a reputation. If you want the easy, low-hanging fruit, go to him and say, do you get people coming to you with stuff that they want fixed that you just don't care to fix and want to dump it off on someone?
Sure. That makes a lot of sense.
It's not a job title. It's you just doing it.
That makes sense. I had that actually in my last company. I was that guy, and that was some of my favorite parts of the job. I left the job because the company is fairly unstable and it was becoming problematic. But I would love it if I could somehow figure out how to get that again.
And you know how to write.
Yeah.
So here is a way that some people do this. They pick a niche in the market and they just start blogging about it. Maybe something new, maybe something exciting, something nobody else is talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And they just start blogging about it. And all of a sudden, they become the expert in X.
Mm-hmm.
So one of two things happen. Within your company, you can be known as the expert of X. Within the industry, you become known as the expert of X. Either they start relying on you more, or people start reaching out to you, which gives you two things: a side gig, or B, a job opportunity at a higher level doing X. You've got to figure out what X is. A lot of times technology is fast changing. Be it something new that's coming, and it may be something new that's coming that your company is exploring.
Mm-hmm.
So it gives you the opportunity, because you can write well in a technical field and you can explain it in an understandable way, both to the technical side and the business side. You can kind of start to write your own ticket, and you can be that guy beyond your company.
Mm.
And then they ask you to do speeches in exotic places, which means you get to travel on the company dime. I think that was one of your goals, wasn't it? And eat fancy food at nice restaurants, because companies pay for that for their speakers.
Yes, they do.
Be that person. It solves all your problems.
Sure. Yeah, no, that makes sense. That if I was able to become that, that would solve the work engagement problem, I'll say. It solves the travel problem, because then when I'm in Belize, maybe I'll stay an extra week, take some time off and see Belize. And then it would also probably help the financial problem as well. There'd be a bigger buffer there and can accelerate my goals or decrease the time to reach my goals. So you're right. That'd be like a triple win.
Can Alex do this?
Alex can do this. I can do this. Yeah.
What's the first step?
The first step, that would be to find, I think, some sort of technology that is up and coming, be it in my company or external to my company, and deciding to become an expert on that. So that would mean, what would that mean? For me, that would mean allocating some dollars every month toward this. It doesn't have to even be a lot. It could be like $25, $50 or something. But since we manage every dollar, I'd have to do that. And then basically setting aside some time on a regular basis to spend time about this, set up a blog and start talking through my experience of it, problems I run into and how I solve those so that they would be searchable by other people. I think that's what it would be. And at that point, it seems like just given enough time, if that technology does take off, and if I am one of the, first or people doing this, providing content for it, it would just kind of solve itself with enough time and energy.
You don't need to be the first person providing content. You need to be the person who provides the best content. And because you can write, you have that skill set.
Sure. That makes sense. Yeah, this seems like I could totally do that. I guess one of the things I do like about this is it doesn't immediately jeopardize my current source of income either.
So that was my question to you. Like, what's the downside of this? What's the scary part? What's the fear in doing this?
Oh, man. I guess I fear failure just for failure's sake. Having to say, this didn't work out. I let that mean something about myself. Like I am a failure as opposed to I failed. I conflate the two.
But the failure isn't anything real. The failure's in your mind then, because it's not going to cause you to lose your house. Your wife's not going to leave, and you're not going to have to worry about eating tomorrow to try this idea.
Oh yeah. No, I'm saying that as it's
right.
not a real it's not a real thing. It's a human habit I have.
So do you know how to ride a bicycle?
I do.
You do. You probably failed a lot of times on the way to learning to ride that bicycle.
I did.
You did. And you just get up and you do it again. Yeah. So if the first time it fails, okay, that wasn't how to do it. I'm going to try a different way. I'm going to say, and you're a smart enough guy who can sit down and look at your failure and say, I failed because I didn't pick the right industry or the right product. I failed because I didn't realize how to get my content well received. I failed because I focused on the wrong part of the problem. The next time I do this, I'm not going to fail because of that. I'm going to spend an extra minute to think through that situation and do it again.
That makes sense. I think something is becoming clear to me as I get older, which is when people say failure is how you learn, they actually mean 100% that. Like you try, and if you are so averse to failure that you never try, then you actually are shortcutting a huge part, or you're eliminating a huge part of the learning process.
And you failed because you didn't do anything.
Yeah, you failed.
You already failed immediately because you didn't do anything. You're already a failure.
Yeah. It has only been by me trying stuff, and then that really didn't work that time. Okay, so let's try it a little different. And then eventually you're like, okay, I actually understand what's going on here. And not at a superficial level necessarily. I actually understand why I'm doing what I'm doing and why it works, as opposed to, I think I try to shortcut that process, honestly, just due to my being uncomfortable with failure. And I think that, I think you're right.
We need to embrace failure. One of the ways that I do that is to let go. So if I'm going to write an email or I'm going to release a podcast, I'm going to do it and let go of it. Whatever happens after that happens. I did my part. I succeeded at what I wanted to do, to release a podcast episode, to send an email. If the person getting it doesn't like it or does whatever, that's beyond my control. I can't do anything about it. I did my part. I released it. I'm moving on.
Sure. Yeah. And in that case, you're more interested in what you're doing as opposed to attached to the outcome.
Correct.
That makes sense. Yeah, I gotta learn to give that up. And I admit that I'm someone who's heavily interested in the outcome and attached to the outcome, and that totally will prevent me from doing stuff because I get so overwhelmed by what if it doesn't go right or exactly how I want it, or I get attached to making it perfect, and then I just never even try because perfect is such an unachievable goal.
It is. You can't expect perfect. You make mistakes and you keep going. And that's just what happens. And a lot of times what actually happens is that things happen by accident. You're going searching for one thing, and just in that search, something else happens that resonates or that connects or that occurs that creates massive success, but that wasn't where you were going. It just happened as an accidental byproduct of what you were doing.
Mhm.
In the drug industry, it happens all the time. People go and they're looking for a drug to do X, and they find that the side effect of the drug is Y, and they go, oh, for whatever reason, that drug for heart failure makes hair grow on people's heads. It doesn't do well with heart failure, but let's just market it as a hair growing drug. So in a sense, it was a failure that turned into success.
Mhm.
But you don't know that until you go.
I've had a couple interesting things like that happen in my career where I decided to learn a particular technology sort of on a whim. Like, I don't know, like I haven't looked at all, like what are the 10 things I could learn and what is going to be best for my job. It's more like, I keep hearing about this a lot and people say it's great, so why don't I give it a shot? And quite a surprising number of times when I do that, just kind of playing around, just like having fun learning, I learned something that turns out to be incredibly valuable for my job. And it's like taking my job efficiency to another level. I think it's just kind of being open to, what's coming at me, open to just new learning that has really been the most helpful, not trying to control every little aspect of my career and my job. And like these things just kind of happen.
They do. So you have your first step, which is to figure out an area that you're going to dive in and try. The risk of this is essentially nothing other than time. With any luck, you'll either be successful or you'll learn something that will help you the time you do it again. Through work, you constantly make it known that you want to help people solve problems. So one of the easiest ways to do this is to have coffee meetings or lunches with department heads of other departments. So you're in a large company, correct?
Correct.
Is IT a function of the company? It's not the main thing?
Correct. We make IT hardware that other customers consume, but we do also have our own internal IT department as well to run the company.
In your role, you're the internal IT department, or?
No. So in my role, I provide technical support for our very largest customers.
Okay.
I think they're exclusively Fortune 500 companies.
Within your office, is there sales, marketing, HR, accounting, all these other departments?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So what you do, and you've already got a guy sitting in the next department who's shown you the path. So I would first go have lunch with him and say, how did you end up doing this? The second thing is to go to the different department heads in those other departments and say, hey, I'd like to learn more about what you do in this department and what issues you're facing so that I have a broader understanding of the company. And through those conversations, you may be able to help those people.
Oh, I was going to say, it strikes me that I really need to have this conversation with my boss as well.
Sure.
That's like the real starting place for me. It's like, and now in hindsight, I'm like, why haven't I? And so I just need to make it clear to him at the very least of like, hey, you know what? This is what I want to do. If you have any opportunities, come to me. I'm your man.
Now, that's wonderful. The problem with that is it's a lottery. You're waiting for someone to have a problem and bring it to you instead of going out and finding problems and fixing them.
Got it.
So it's a slightly, if you wait for people, they may or may not come. Control the situation. Sure. Go out and just literally have conversations. Start having conversations with different people across your company. Very casual. Not even like, I want to fix your problems. Just, hey, I'm trying to learn what your department does. What are the issues? See how everything fits together. And as you start to have these conversations, It's like, oh, what type of issues are you having in your department? Is there some way you can fix it technologically? Can you bring them solutions? And then you start to become known throughout as the guy who always has solutions.
Sure. That sounds fascinating.
Just think of it from the opposite standpoint. Everyone's got problems and they wish someone would fix them.
Sure.
Because they don't want to do it. They don't want to put the time and effort into it.
Yeah. They've got enough on their plate, or they just don't know how, or whatever the reason is.
Exactly. Or they just don't do it. So you've got conversation with your boss, conversation with that other gentleman, searching for industry trends and something that you might possibly start writing about. Let's reduce barriers to begin with. You do not need to get real fancy. If there are industry places where you can write, then just write on an existing forum. So you don't have to worry in the beginning about creating your own. You just go out to an existing forum. Even LinkedIn allows you to write articles, I think, onto their platform. Find an existing platform where those people are already searching or asking questions, and just go into there so that you don't have to go through all the friction of, oh, do I need to start a website? What do I call my website? How do I register a domain? How do I get traffic? Like, now you're creating more problems instead of just going where the problem is and starting, because then you have much less friction and you have much less downside time-wise and all of that, because they're already, you go fishing where the fish are is basically what it is.
Makes sense.
Other things that you want to chat about with regards to work?
No, actually, yeah. Let me bring up something. So I think one thing that I would love, if I could find how it make happen, is feeling more freedom around time and work. And what I mean is, my wife will graduate next year, for example, and she's going to take probably a good month or two off and just recoup from graduate school. I will not have the opportunity to take off a month or two with her just because my work doesn't give me that time off, at least not officially.
Have you asked?
I have not, actually. So I was wondering what you think. I was wondering about talking to my boss and thinking about what would it take to get me an unpaid month off or something like that.
I would go in and have the conversation and lay it out. I don't know that I do it this far out, because that's a year away, right? I don't know that I would do it a year away. First of all, I'd see if other people in your company have ever done anything like this. So that's just casual conversations. Has anyone ever taken a month off? That's probably step one. Step two is when you go to him, and you have to figure out the timing. And there's no harm in asking. I would explain to him and tell him why. And then the other option is to also let him know, hey, if you have emergencies during that time, I'll answer your calls.
Sure.
Because that's the biggest thing. What do I do if there's a problem?
Yeah.
Of course, you could just have a kid and go on paternity leave for a few weeks.
Yes. I doubt that time would be spent in Spain, though. Or maybe I guess I could make that
probably
work.
Not. There's nothing wrong with trying.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're right. I think he's my boss has also shown himself to be a very approachable individual. So I think having that conversation would be something I don't need to actually feel worried about.
The other thing is timing, and that only you can know workflow wise. Is there something else going on around that time that causes things to be out of whack? Or is it a good time overall, or a lull time in your business that makes it easier to say yes?
Sure. That makes sense.
And in the meantime, if you spend the next 6 months helping people and doing great things, then they're more than happy to say, yeah, that'll work.
That makes sense. Yeah.
You also, in the questions that I got back, you seem to have some mindsets that would have prevented you from moving way up.
Which, you mean way up like in an organization?
Correct. Within an organization.
Got it. Okay. Can you flesh that out?
You said pretty much promotion to middle management, and it surprised you in that you never considered yourself a candidate for management.
Oh, yes. 100%. So yeah, the story there is I've been at my current company for about a year and 6 months, basically. And my boss, you was like, hey, where are you going? Because you're going places. If you stay doing what you're doing now, you're getting promoted. You could probably try for the engineering position above you and probably get that. Or he's like, I'll also groom you for management. I just never saw myself as capable enough of doing that. Regardless of whether or not I'm actually interested in that, I just never considered myself as capable enough to do that. So I was a little surprised and taken aback that he would even offer that, to be honest.
And why didn't you think you were capable?
I guess I have a story about myself, which is basically that I'm really good with technologies, and I'm not really good with people. I guess I view that role as a people-centric role that maybe just wouldn't play to my strengths, or I don't know. It just wasn't even on my radar, to be honest, at all.
Can I give you a 3-letter word to fix it all?
Yes.
All right. I'm really good with technology, but I'm not so good with people.
Yeah. As in, there's possibility. It can change. Things can happen.
Absolutely. You went to, you dig in and you learn. You went to a program, Landmark, and I've heard of that before. I haven't personally been, but I know people who've been there.
Mm-hmm.
If you went into that type of a program with that type of a mindset and thought, what would they tell you?
They would tell me exactly that. They would tell me, you're capable of far more than you think you are. And what's holding you back is not real. It's in your head. It's the story you've told yourself about who you are that's keeping you from doing that. While you may not have those skills today, why don't you go get those skills? Or why don't you take a step towards doing that?
And I'm going to tell you this, you may not think you have the skills, but your manager already says you have the skills, which means they're there. You just don't realize it.
Yeah.
And it comes back to the one thing. We're looking at colleges now for my daughter, and she was in a more standard type of program before. She's now homeschooled. She was classically educated. So that liberal arts, learning how to think and write and do that, people don't have that. It's a lost art. That was an education that was given to the elite. And that's the kind of education that you probably received. And you just don't realize how far your separation is from others.
Yeah, I really don't. I'll say this to help reinforce, but I don't give myself enough credit for how I perform and what I accomplish. My boss told me 10 months after I'm on this team here, like 11 months, he's like, you're number 2 on the team, right? I'm like, no. I just self-deprecate constantly and self-sabotage. It really just holds me back. It serves, I know what purpose it serves. It serves the purpose of like, if I'm harder on myself and like more negative about myself, then I'll never have to be disappointed if someone else is hard on me or says I like failed, because then I'm like, no, I already knew that. I'm a failure. So it's totally self-serving and just is like trying to avoid the pain that might come from someone telling me I'm failing at something. But it's at the same time, I need to recognize it's totally not helpful, and it's self-sabotaging and is really the primary thing holding me back at this point.
Correct. And so for today, we did not use your real name. We used Alex. We made him up.
Correct.
Alex needs to make up a new name for himself and a new life and a new vision and just go be that person.
Yeah, that's true.
There's no reason you can't. Here's somebody who came out making $11 an hour in 2009, correct?
Mm-hmm. 2008, actually, but yeah.
2008. So 9 years ago, you went from $11 an hour to a six-figure income.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, most people don't do that.
That's true.
With a liberal arts degree, I mean, really? Come on. In technology, how do you even get into technology with a liberal arts degree? Alex has already made up his own life and his story. He just needs to make a new one, better one that fits in better. Sounds like you need to go have a lot of conversations with your boss.
Yeah.
You need to go have conversations with other people. And the question you need to ask is, I'm trying to do an inventory of myself. I'm looking for feedback. I'm not going to respond to your feedback. I just need to know, what is it that I'm good at? What are the things that I excel in? If people were to come up with a topic and say, I need an expert in blank, what is Alex an expert in? And go listen to what the people around you at work are saying. That will help you develop your picture of who the new Alex is.
That makes sense. I did a very similar exercise due to my participation in the Landmark curriculum. And they called it interviewing. They said basically go to someone. It could be a friend. It could be a coworker. It could be the guy at Starbucks you get coffee from every day. Just ask them, who do I occur for you as? Like, who do you see me as? And then just listen to their response. I did that with several of my coworkers and friends, and I was surprised that the responses I got were far more positive than if I had guessed.
Do you have those written down?
I do not.
Okay. Do you remember most of them?
I remember a few of them. In particular, one person said that I showed up for her as a leader and a friend and an educator, as opposed to just a colleague who just kind of came and sat next to her in a cube all day. And that kind of, I was like, wow, a leader, huh? I just thought I was doing my job.
So you've got your person next to you and your boss telling you you're a leader.
Yeah.
The new picture of Alex is he's a leader.
Yeah, it's true.
And everything we've talked about is you leading. You're going to lead into figuring out what you're going to be the expert at. And then you're going to go and you're going to teach people and share your knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
It's all coming together.
It's a consistent theme.
Consistent theme. Greatest thing about all of this theme is it cost almost $0.
Yeah.
Which means that there's no economic risk. It's a time risk.
Mm-hmm.
And you're young. You got lots of time.
Yeah. And I think the only thing really holding me back is my fear of what if it doesn't work out? And that's no longer a good enough excuse.
No. And this is for everyone. The number one obstacle everybody faces is the reflection in the mirror. So change the reflection. Change the mirror. Cover the mirror with the new Alex.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or just stop looking in the mirror so much and go do.
Go do it. That's fine. Absolutely.
Yeah.
You've got a handful of different first steps in a handful of different areas that allow you to go do that. This is kind of where long-term coaching comes in, because this is where you go and you do something and you've got dates set to it. And coaching, of course, costs money. So now you've got economic incentive to it. I'm paying all this money. I best go do something. It changes the mindset.
Sure.
That's where coaching helps. It keeps you on track and it keeps you focused and it helps you make sure you do what you say you're going to do when things come off the rails or when something shiny comes in and says, "Ooh, look at this new shiny thing." The coach's job is to reel you back in and go, does that really fit into your plan? And then you say, no, it doesn't. And then it helps you back in. If you haven't, I don't know if Landmark doesn't really set you up for a life plan. It sets you up more for goals over the year, a couple of years. Is that correct?
It depends on which of their programs you do. So I, at this point, just finished their self-expression and leadership program in earlier this year, and now I'm actually coaching that same program starting next month. They don't set you up for a life plan so much, but they basically, ultimately, they're trying to get you to realize that you're far bigger and more capable than you've given yourself credit for. And what's stopping you is that reflection in the mirror.
I think I missed that. Alex is teaching the leadership thing for Landmark. Is that what
So
you said?
yeah, so let me step back and talk about my curriculum path there. So I first did the Landmark Forum back in June or July of last year, which is a 3-day intensive weekend session. Followed that up with their advanced course, where they kind of build upon stuff they taught you in the forum, and that's again a 3-day intensive weekend program. After that, I did what's called their self-expression and leadership program. That is, it was a 6-month course where you have a coach. You basically pick a community project that you are going to work on. And it has to be something that's of interest to you and you care about. And that's about all the criteria. You will basically meet with your coach once a week in your small group once a week and talk about how things are going and what challenges you're facing. I'm not excited about my project anymore, or I'm having this huge roadblock I don't know how to solve, or I'm overwhelmed or whatever. So that's a 6-month program of just basically helping you realize that you can affect change at a community level. And that makes sense?
Makes total sense.
I took that program, and then out of that, I decided I wanted to continue participating in Landmark programs, but my participation is changing from being less of a consumer of it and more of a teacher of it. And so what I will be doing is coaching that same program, the self-expression leadership program, starting next month. So it starts June 3rd.
And you'll be the leader.
I'll be one of 8 coaches who works with the leader of the program, correct?
All right. But the point is, you're going out and you're doing it.
Yes, I am.
And you're leading others.
I am. It's I'll be honest, it's super intimidating for me. It makes me uncomfortable. But I've learned one thing in the last year, that's not a bad thing.
No, it's not. That's where growth comes from, that discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. You need to lean in and do it. So it sounds like you've got a whole bunch of great things going on, and they're all coming together, and you've got action steps across. So that is all looking good. The one thing that popped up on my radar, you buy a lot of company stock.
I do, yes. Go ahead and talk, and then I'll answer. I think I can guess what your concerns will be. Concerns
are risk of a portfolio highly weighted to one thing, because let's just say, your company turns into Enron, you lose your job and you lose your stock. That you just need to be comfortable with it. And then if you're getting a deal on company stock, take the deal and have a systematic way to liquidate. Just be comfortable with that portion. You don't want it to be out of line with the rest of your portfolio. And there are also other ways that you can remove risk by selling options against it. If you want to keep the stock because you think it's going to go really well, but you want to put a little downside protection in.
Sure. So no, I 100% agree with the risk on that. And actually what I do is I've opted in for the maximum amount I can for our employee stock purchase plan, because I get a pretty hefty discount of that. What it is basically I get to buy in at the lowest price of the stock at either the opening of the quarter or the closing of the quarter. I get a discount on whichever is lower. So as long as I sell on the day that stock is purchased, or sell the day after, there is no way for me to lose money on that. So that's how we do it. We basically get a discount, sell immediately, and then either use that to help cover our expenses or pour that back in towards the debt.
Perfect plan. And the facts that you're maximizing it is awesome. So yeah, kudos on that.
Thanks.
Questions for me at this point?
Let me think. So we've talked through all the major things I wanted to cover. And nothing's coming to mind. No lingering questions from me at this point.
Okay. You have a handful of next steps for yourself professionally, inside your company, kind of outside your company, and you just need to go change the reflection and become who you want to be. You've got all the tools inside of you. You've got the knowledge. You've got the education. The only thing stopping you is you. Yeah,
that's true. I think I'm becoming a lot more aware of that in the last year. And this has been another helpful conversation, just reiterating that, going like, all these external reasons I use to justify my inaction are just that. They're just reasons. The worst part about it is they're all made up. I'm not going to lose my house. I'm not going to lose my job, etc. I just need to get over my fear of failure. And that's I can do that. And what I've learned has been so helpful is something can seem so overwhelming that I'll put it off for months or years or whatever it be. But then it's really just about starting. And 20, 30 minutes in, I'm like, oh, well, this isn't so bad. Most of the time, like I get to that point where I actually go like, all right, I have to deal with this problem. And then I start and I'm like, oh, this isn't nearly as bad as I made it out to be in my head. And a lot of times it turns out to be fun. Not every time, but a lot of times I'm like, okay, this is actually kind of enjoyable. It's the silliest thing in hindsight, where you're like, why did I put this off for 2 months or 2 years or 10 years or whatever it may be? It's just starting. Once you start and start that inertia, I found that a lot of times it just keeps going.
It does. And that's the absolute truth. And that's where regrets come in from never doing it. The reality is it's much harder to start than it is to continue moving or to finish. If you can get started, you've probably overcome the biggest hurdle of all.
I agree.
Anything else you want to chat about today?
No, I think I'm good. I think we've covered everything I wanted to cover. This has been great.
I'm glad that we were able to do this and that it's been helpful.
Yeah, me too. Thank you very much, Rocky.
Yeah, thank you for being here. For Alex, the reflection in the mirror is his biggest obstacle. He has success and doesn't realize how exceptional he already is. The fear of failure should not prevent us from taking the next step. I'd love to hear from you about future topics you would like me to cover. Please email me at rocky@richersoul.com. Thanks for listening.